Chechnya is on the brink of turmoil, while Georgia faces its own dangerous trends. Putin is panicking over inflation, and despite the national bank raising the discount rate, it isn't effective. Today, we'll cover 3 topics in 30 minutes. I'm Iryna Uzlova, joined by Valeriy Klochok, head of the Center for Public Analysis. Valeriy, greetings, and thank you for being here. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Greetings, friends and viewers. We're live on YouTube 24, so please share your likes and questions to help our conversation. Today, I found Ramzan Kadyrov's posts interesting. Instead of addressing threats or the Tesla situation, he focused on the recent drone attack at the Special Forces University. Valeriy, this is the first time it's come through, so we hope it's us. Although there has been no official confirmation, what processes will this mood set in motion among the Kadyrovites and in Chechnya as a whole? You know that I am quite cautious in making these predictions about the situation in the Caucasus because it is not yet worth saying that everything will break out tomorrow. I don't want to, give the audience any unconfirmed data. But what does this particular attack prove? Let's note that the number of drones reported by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation was not that many last night. The information that I have seen is about 7. Well, okay, let's say more. Let's say 17 or 20. It's not enough. There should be more. But one drone flies unimpeded into Chechnya and strikes, even if it's an empty room, as Ramzan Kadyrov says, but you can obviously see that it's on fire. And he himself says that it flew there. What does this mean? It means that the air defense system on the territory of Russia is not much. There are few, extremely few, and they cannot cover all the important facilities. Even in Chechnya itself, as it turns out, there is absolutely nothing to control the air. That is, Chechnya is vulnerable from the air. These are at least my first conclusions. Kadyrov claims the Russian Special Forces University is operating normally and that no one was killed. However, this situation could significantly undermine stability in the Caucasus. I wish there were more drone flights over the area, even targeting empty rooms. Drones are reportedly less costly than missiles.
Не думаю, що це дуже так дорого вартує. Безпілотники, які ми виготовляємо, принаймні та інформація, які вони є не катастрофічно дорогими.
While cost of production is irrelevant, drone strikes serve as a highly effective destabilizing factor. Recently, an Ural vehicle belonging to the Russian Guard was attacked, resulting in the death of a Rosgvardia officer. This incident highlights ongoing efforts to establish an independent republic in Chechnya.
Документи навіть публікували його, вони мовляв просрочені, але ми розуміємо, це настільки важливо. Тобто сьогодні є ще ті, і залишаються ті...
Kadyrov understands this, and any destabilizing factors on the territory of Russia are very useful to us. We have to support them, despite the fact that we do not have the same opinion in the West in this regard. They think one way, we need to do ours. Even at first glance, these seemingly innocent strikes on the territory of Russia are, in my opinion, very significant and important. The rest should be done by local residents. When drone attacks occurred in Tatarstan, particularly in Elabug, Rustam Minakhanov, the head of Tatarstan, stated that local residents and authorities are responsible for protecting against enemy drones. Meanwhile, Kadyrov and his entourage hold more privilege and importance in the eyes of the Kremlin. Obviously, they may go now to ask for more air defense systems or more protection. How do you think the Kremlin will respond to requests for protecting Chechnya and the Kadyrov clan? And if it does, and Minakhanov looks at it and sees that he has all the Goloboso he's been given, will this cause more disparate moods between these regions and the Kremlin's attitude toward them? Please note that nothing has been arriving in Yelabuga lately. Russia is actively producing shakedowns, and the number of shakedowns that arrive every night is very high. A significant nuance is that we discuss the production of Shahed drones in Iran. Iran may face production delays due to the destruction of many military facilities and its air defense system. The 3 surviving S-300 systems were recently destroyed in an Israeli attack. The key question now is whether Russia can assist Iran with its air defense.
І тепер стоїть питання, чи Росія зможе допомогти Ірану
and drone production.
повітряної оборони і безпілотниками безпосередньо.
It's not accurate to say that Shahed production in Iran has completely stopped, as Iran has exported technology to Russia. However, the production of Iranian missiles is effectively suspended. This issue is still under negotiation between Russia and Iran.
Фактично сьогодні призупинена, і це питання, воно хоч і є на стадії поки що переговорів між Росією і Іраном, але воно працює. Вибачайте, що
I'm still going off topic, but I think this is a very important point, because Russia today understands the importance of preserving military facilities. And the fact that no planes are flying over Yelabuga indicates that, in my opinion, some kind of air defense systems have been installed there. For example, many Russian oil refineries have purchased systems on their own to neutralize drones that can reach them, and they are, of course, partially successful. There have been fewer strikes on refineries, possibly due to the presence of air defense systems, which require a large number of drones and missiles to penetrate. For instance, Israel used 100 aircraft to bypass Iranian air defense. We don't have that capacity, so it's crucial to focus on effective destabilizing actions. It's important to note that without significant Western support for the scenario of Russia's collapse, implementing it is very challenging. We're being advised against targeting oil refineries, as highlighted by Austin's statements this spring. Nonetheless, this puts pressure on our Western partners, who also pressure Russia. I'm convinced that Russia is sending requests through various channels, and Umarov confirmed ongoing contact with Russia since 2022. The answer is clear. Since you're fighting against Ukraine, any destabilizing factors are beneficial for us. However, it's unlikely that Kadyrov will feel more dissatisfied because Yelabuga received assistance, and he did not, as federal issues in Russia are resolved differently. Some Russian elites in various regions understand they can apply pressure on the center, but it won't be significant.
Тому що на федеральному рівні на Росії ці питання вирішуються зовсім по-іншому.
Consider the recent shootout in Moscow, where a Kadyrov ally was reportedly killed. Kadyrov vowed revenge on the deputies, but nothing has come of it. The statement was intended to intimidate, and while the Kremlin gave Kadyrov some leeway, their response was cautious. Peskov downplayed the situation, saying the Kremlin had no involvement and suggested they handle it themselves. That is why Kadyrov will remain at the forefront of the processes in Russia as a deterrent to destabilization and a factor in destabilizing various situations that arise. In fact, the Caucasus is under Kadyrov's control. It's obvious. Remember the story of the riots in Dagestan? Who was suppressing them in the Rosgvardia? Kadyrov. So, of course, Kadyrov can talk about some air defense systems, he can even buy them, pay for them, and so on. The paradox is that Kadyrov must purchase systems from the Russian Ministry of Defense and communicate directly with Belarus. However, Russia is struggling to meet Iran's requests, such as delivering S-400 systems. Our resistance to Russian aggression in Ukraine has deterred Iran's military ambitions in the Middle East. These complexities highlight the intertwining of geopolitics.
посилення військової агресії Ірану на Близькому Сході.
Therefore, the Kadyrov story can be viewed, as one that can create some tension, but it will not be decisive. Kadyrov is well aware of his place in Russia. He knows that he is a priority for the Putin regime, and the Kremlin cannot do him any harm at this stage. The Kremlin is holding Kadyrov hostage to a certain extent, but how the situation will develop further in terms of discontent is a matter of different programs. Yelabuga is about making shaheds, which is strategically important for Russia today. That's why I happen to mention that it may happen that Russia will continue to supply shaheds to Iran, and not vice versa, as it used to be. We need to keep an eye on it and continue our work. We managed to strike Chechnya with a drone, launch a drone there every day, so that 5 drones explode at gas stations in Grozny. This would be useful for igniting Russia from the Caucasus. This option is more effective than the confrontation between the Tatarstan and Chechen Batashkas. At a joint press conference during the Ukraine-Northern Europe summit in Iceland, President Zelensky mentioned that information emerged in early September about a shipment of ballistic missiles being sent to Russia. He stated that Iran has not yet sent its ballistic missiles, but negotiations with Moscow are ongoing. They are discussing aid packages, including Shahed drones and potential missile provisions, though none have been delivered yet. We should avoid viewing Russia-Iran relations in a linear manner, as there are multiple factors at play. Iran and Russia are implementing a very large logistics project called North-South. Russia once invested more than $1 billion in this project. This is the construction of a railroad that connects Azerbaijan, and through Azerbaijan, Iran and Russia, and India will join it. There are complex processes going on there. Given that India today has received the green light to cooperate with Russia from the West, but under pressure from Putin, India is now also announcing restrictions on oil purchases from Russia. The missile program between Iran and Russia is one of the elements of this complex geopolitical structure. Given that Iran wants to dominate the Middle East, it needs a lot of weapons, a lot of missiles. Note that Iran's latest attack on Israel was launched from that message. What I saw was hundreds of missiles and drones, just like before. The missiles are very primitive, but they fly. Yes, they can be shot down. They are not very effective, but there are a lot of them. Iran had the opportunity to test them. However, again, we should not underestimate the missiles that Iran can deliver to Russia. These are short-range missiles similar to those supplied by the U.S. to us. Iran faces numerous internal issues and is not yet ready for full cooperation. Regarding Shaheds, the focus is now on supplying specific technologies rather than just the drones. The production of Shaheds in Yelabuga involves not only Russian citizens but also individuals from other countries, reflecting various factors at play. There is a labor shortage in Russia, with people reluctant to move to regions like Chechnya. This makes missiles a key element in bargaining and negotiations. Russia is not fulfilling its contracts to supply Iran with air defense systems and other military obligations. Consequently, Iran is in need of weapons.
Це ж саме стосується і авіації, інших військових зобов'язань, які Росія має виконати перед Іраном. Тобто Іран потребує зброї.
But Russia's war against Ukraine significantly reduces the ability of the Russians to transfer these weapons to Iran. They will be handed over to North Korea today. It's not as simple as it might seem at first glance. Labor shortages and inflation. Putin blamed Western sanctions for inflation. The Russian economy says difficulties remain, the Russian dictator said at a meeting. He noted that problems stem from challenging conditions, including external sanctions and internal shortages of personnel, technology, and logistics. In addition, Russian opposition media have learned that Rosstat has begun to withhold detailed inflation data, classifying a third of the federal budget, foreign trade turnover, oil and gas production, and other key economic data. They want to hide another block of inflation statistics as well. The Central Bank of Russia has raised its key policy rate to 21% per annum, the highest in over 2 decades, due to rising inflation, increased demand, and a widening budget deficit. The central bank aims to curb rapid price growth, but some analysts see these issues as superficial, suggesting Putin's economy is stable. However, the situation could be more concerning. What's the current status? A very interesting article was published in the Washington Post, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, in this edition.
До речі, стосовно, якщо я не помилився, підкажіть мені, Washington Post, бо це дуже цікавий матеріал.
In the context of U.S. elections, there's another important point to consider regarding this particular edition. 200,000 subscribers canceled due to the Washington Post's neutrality. Yes, the Washington Post reported that the Russian economy is overheated, and the Financial Times also covers this extensively, leading to information overload. I emphasize this because the Washington Post's editorial board declared its neutrality, stating a return to its historical policy after years of favoring Democrats. This shift has caused internal scandals. It's positive for the media to avoid favoring any political force and strive for objectivity, rather than engaging in constant propaganda about Russia's imminent collapse. If we take this material into account, what is written is that there are different views on the situation in Russia regarding the economy. Indeed, the Russian economy is overheated because they have directed all their resources to strengthening the military-industrial complex to the maximum. The military-industrial complex has significantly expanded, boosting Russia's GDP in 2023 and 2024. These are not inflated figures. This is reality. But the growth potential will continue to decline significantly because the current period will be taken as a basis, and there is no growth in the economy, which leads to stagnation and directly leads to inflation. For various reasons, the fact that the central bank raised the rate to 21% is a signal. I mean in Russia, but I remind you that Ukraine had a similar situation. We have largely coped thanks to substantial international financial assistance. Russia is limited in its ability to receive aid, but it has the capacity, as this publication actually writes about, to receive large foreign exchange earnings from the sale of oil on the black market and, let's say, on the white market, because Russia sells white oil as well, bought under official contracts, and Russia is paid for it. For Russia, 2024 may end with record revenues from oil sales in general, which is a huge amount, about $200 billion. And this is the basis for the conclusions of analysts, my colleagues in the West, who say that Russia will be able to fight even further. І те, що економіка не зростатиме, їм необхідно буде вводити якісь інші інструменти для того, щоб понизити інфляцію і приваблювати вплив. Inflation could pose a significant challenge, and stagnant economic growth may force them to implement measures to reduce inflation by injecting money into the economy. However, doing so is difficult amid sanctions. Potential investors could include India, China, and other Asian countries. But after the BRICS summit, there is caution regarding Putin's focus on concentrating resources for the war rather than fostering economic development. Russia is trying to fight not only against Ukraine, as it is doing today, but even the Baltic states, the NATO countries, remain in its field of interest, as they have repeatedly stated. To do this, Putin needs more resources, i.e., economic growth, to curb inflation. They need really different market mechanisms, because no matter how primitive and banal it may seem now, the Russian economy is a market economy, and Putin does not take this into account. He believes that it will be like in the Soviet Union, when technology was weak and resources were used mainly internally. In the late 80s, and even in the early 80s, there were huge investments in the military-industrial complex of the Soviet Union, and a lot of household items were produced at military plants. I did not misspeak. Military plants could produce, relatively speaking, pots and pans. Today, if it is a military plant, it produces missiles, and if it is a private enterprise, it produces household items and makes them with high quality. Wage distortions, such as mobilized soldiers receiving $30,000 while milkmaids earn $1,500, can make certain sectors uncompetitive and require manual regulation. Putin's tendency is toward a complete shutdown of the Russian economy, which could be fatal for him, similar to the situation in Korea. Korea is currently afloat by advancing technologically, catching up with the Soviet Union and Russia. It gets components from China, which helps it. The microchips and various elements used in North Korea's missiles come largely from China, because China has the technology. The sanctions policy may sooner or later play a cruel joke on Russia. The question is why it is not happening now. Going back to the beginning of the analysis of the economic situation, this is a very big topic. I'm sorry for this lengthy statement, but here we have to take into account oil, around which there are many different movements. I would say that the Middle East is an exceptional factor in this story, including for Russia. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that in the last few days, oil prices have started to fall again, and the fall began after Israel's strike on Iran, which caused prices to fall rather than rise. It is paradoxical that during a war, oil prices rise, but today, the war in the Middle East is not the main determinant of oil prices. There are serious problems in the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Russia, which are not talked about or written about much. Why didn't the Saudis come to BRICS? My colleagues and I have been analyzing this for several days now, collecting information and systematizing it within the Center for Public Analysis Tower. I recommend following our analytical reviews as we delve into details showing that relations between the Saudis and Russians are tense. Within OPEC+, Russia is not adhering to recommendations to cut oil production and continues to maintain high output, capturing global markets. The Saudis' statement about increasing production signals their intent to dominate markets, reduce prices, and engage in dumping. The consequences of this situation will be serious not just for Russia, but for the entire world. The Washington Post's claim that Russia can sustain its fight due to money is uncertain. Much depends on external factors that keep it afloat. If global interest in Russia's war against Ukraine wanes, it could significantly reduce Russia's ability to manufacture and procure weapons, especially from North Korea, in the next 6 months. Even if Russia has approximately $300 to $400 billion in state budget revenues, this does not mean that all this money will be spent on military needs. They still need to support the population. Yes, the population is ready to be poor and below the poverty line. According to rough estimates, 60 to 65% are now below the poverty line. They can accept 70 or even 80%.
Так, воно готове бідніти, воно готове знаходитися за межею бідності. Сьогодні там за приблизними підрахунками десь...
Putin, of course, does not care about this, but sooner or later it will lead to irreversible processes. The Russian economy will not hold on. It is worth recalling what happened in the early 1990s in Russia, Ukraine, and the entire post-Soviet space. Rampant inflation, hyperinflation, skyrocketing prices, food shortages, and frozen trade chains.
Це було і в Україні, на пострадянському просторі всьому. Інфляційні процеси були шалені, була гіперінфляція, знецінення...
Russia can expect this. Going back to conditions 1, 2, 3, there are several factors involved. Russia is well aware of this. Putin thinks that everything will somehow dissolve, but it will not. He is only staying afloat because, let me remind you, he is being greatly assisted by China and Iran, as well as North Korea.
Він залишається на плаву лише тому, що сьогодні йому, ще раз нагадаю, допомагає дуже сильно Китай і Іран. Перепрошую, Північна Корея, навіть менше Іран. Відтак...
It is the effectiveness of its policy toward China that will determine Russia's ability to continue the war. Given that China is currently experiencing deflationary processes, prices are falling there due to a decrease in demand for goods and services produced in China, especially in the domestic market. Investments are not coming in, and the Chinese authorities have decided to reinvest and partially repay loans. There are indeed many problems there, and they will be forced to cooperate with the West or launch new initiatives. China has no other choice, and the question remains how strategically prepared it is for a major war. Analysts have varying predictions. While there is evidence of readiness, reports suggest that in the short term, given the West's capability to deter Russian aggression, China is lagging in its ability to implement such a scenario.
Зважаючи на те, що все-таки Захід нарощує спроможності стримувати російську агресію, як ми бачимо, і гроші більше виділяються на оборонку.
Today they will be thinking about how to ultimately maintain stability in their internal situation. So there is a dependence of the Russian economy on internal and external factors. And this is a complex maze and a process that should be considered. But the fact that Russia is not doing well is true. But it is not a fact that Russia will collapse tomorrow. Valerie, we have literally 3 minutes left. But I can't help but ask you, while the story of Russian oil is unfolding, and the West is counting the North Koreans who might be doing something on the Russian-Ukrainian battlefield, Russia is implementing another typical story in Georgia. There are opposition protests there, which were called for by the Georgian president. And frankly, we haven't had time to understand whether they were real protests. The Russian media is full of information that the Kremlin benefits from shedding blood and further binding Georgia to itself, using it to further Putin's agenda of scaling up conflicts. Putin has learned from his mistakes in Ukraine and aims to establish a pro-Russian government there, using all available means.
Використовує максимально усі засоби і методи для того, щоб там просто утверджувати проросійську владу.
Moldova and Georgia
Не забуваємо про Молдову, є класикою в цьому варіанті.
exemplify this scenario, and even countries like Bulgaria are experiencing growing pro-Russian influence through Russian funding in politics and media. Unfortunately, this is also happening here, and we need to stay vigilant. Georgia is a classic case of successful implementation of the Russian measure. And to be honest, I predicted that there will be no protests in Georgia, which could have been decisive after the foreign agents law. Currently, they are initiating a scenario with mandates, but its success is uncertain. There are no prospects for significant changes toward European integration in Georgia in the near future. Even the Prime Minister has made pro-Russian statements,
Навіть прем'єр-міністр Грузії сказав про-російськи, що він
Expressing support for European integration, like a pro-Russian presidential candidate in Moldova.
Він сказав, я за євроінтеграцію.
Azarov made similar claims in Ukraine. It's one thing to say it, and quite another to pull Georgia into the Russian arbitration system. Thank you, Valeriy, for your analysis. Friends, for more insights, follow the link to Valeri's YouTube channel, subscribe, and come back tomorrow. Valeriy, good luck, take care, goodbye, and good luck.
Хай щастить.
Valeriy Klochok, head of the Center for Public Analysis Vezha, joined Iryna Uzlova. Thank you to the 1,500 viewers. Please comment if you're watching the recording and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to support our discussions.